Bats are one of the most extraordinary groups of mammals alive today. These fantastic flying animals are the second most diverse order of living mammals, beaten only by rodents. More than 1,400 species are recognised, meaning they make up over 20% of all modern mammals. Bats are also one of only 3 lineages of vertebrates, those animals with a backbone, to have evolved the capability of true powered flight, the other 2 being the pterosaurs and, of course, the birds. Bats, known scientifically as Chiroptera, from the Greek for hand wing, have some amazingly diverse lifestyles, with diets consisting of insects, fruit, nectar, small vertebrates, and even blood. They're found on every continent except for Antarctica and have existed for over 50, probably even 60 million years. Unlike the birds and the pterosaurs, bats fly using their entire hands, with skin membranes stretching between their arms, legs, and extending to the tips of their elongated 2nd to 5th fingers, whereas birds fly with feathers and have reduced fingers, and the pterosaurs supported their wing membranes with a hyper-elongate 4th finger. Despite their astonishing modern diversity and remarkable ability to adapt to all kinds of different environments and food sources, the origin of bats is still poorly understood. The early evolution of this spectacular group of animals is one of the most intriguing mysteries in paleontology, and the study of bat evolution and their relationships to other mammals, and even the relationships between different bat lineages, has resulted in some pretty intense debate among scientists. For starters, what exactly did the first bats look like, and what did they evolve from? Well, that brings us to the first mystery of bat evolution, because the oldest complete fossil skeletons we know of already look very similar to fully formed, flight-capable modern bats. The most ancient complete bat fossil that's been found so far was announced in April of 2023, and it dates back to the early Eocene epoch, around 52 million years ago. The species it belongs to is named Ichoronycteris gunneli, and the fossils known for this little bat are just stunning. They're pretty much perfectly preserved with every bone present, and it's clear that this animal was already a flyer, with those long arms and elongated finger bones for supporting the wing membrane, just as in modern bats. However, it still displays a suite of very primitive traits as well. Ichoronycteris gunneli was found in the Green River Formation of Wyoming, which has also produced a number of other early bat species, including one named Onychonycteris. Onychonycteris is a very interesting bat, with the fossil of this animal showing that, anatomically, it's the most primitive bat currently known, although it lived slightly later than Ichoronycteris gunneli, indicating that it must have branched off from other bats earlier on in their evolution. Onychonycteris was definitely capable of powered flight, with long arms, elongated fingers, and all the right muscle attachment points on the bones to pull this off. However, the key difference in this species is that it probably couldn't echolocate yet. Echolocation is a biological superpower, and an integral part of what has enabled bats to become so successful. By producing ultrasound in the larynx, bats can then emit these sounds as pulses either through their mouths or through their noses, and then listen to the resulting echoes that bounce back to locate prey. Bats that use laryngeal echolocation possess relatively large cochleae, part of the inner ear bones, that are involved in the detection of high-frequency sounds. Non-echolocating mammals have relatively much smaller cochleae, and the bone anatomy of the ear region can be used to tell whether a mammal has a large cochlea or not. Well, it turns out that Onychonycteris probably had fairly small ones, and therefore likely was not echolocating. Now, I need to quickly add here that there was some back and forth between 2 groups of scientists over whether Onychonycteris could really echolocate, with another team saying that it actually could echolocate, but then the original team that described the species replying and stating more evidence suggesting it couldn't. So, for now, it seems more likely that it wasn't echolocating. Secondly, it's important to note that the echolocation we're talking about here is specifically laryngeal echolocation, where the ultrasound is produced in the larynx. However, there's a group of bats that actually don't have this ability, the bats traditionally called megabats, including the fruit bats and flying foxes. Most of these megabats don't echolocate at all, but just to make things interesting, a few species in the genus Rosetus do click their tongues and use this sound to echolocate. And 2 other species of fruit bats can actually produce clicks with their wings in order to utilize a basic form of echolocation. But again, it's not laryngeal echolocation. This loss of echolocation in some lineages is something we'll come back to later. Looking at Onychonycteris again, the discovery of this early Eocene bat therefore showed that the ability to fly had evolved before echolocation did, helping to solve one question that bat researchers had been debating in the past. Onychonycteris also offers some insight into how exactly flight came about in these animals too, as this species retains claws on the ends of all 5 of its digits. Some modern bat species retain 2 pairs of claws on their digits, but none still have all 5. It therefore seems that Onychonycteris was probably using its clawed wings to climb about in trees. More evidence for this comes from the fact that its limb proportions and robust fibula in the leg suggest it could move about with some agility when it walked on all 4s. As such, it was suggested that bats evolved flight through the trees down approach, as opposed to ground up, descending from agile climbers that clambered up trees in order to catch prey, and then presumably started experimenting with leaping between branches, which gave rise to gliding and then fully powered flight. So it's clear that there were already a fair few bat species present in the early Eocene, and they weren't all particularly closely related to each other. These mammals must have already undergone a radiation, increasing in diversity very early on in the Eocene, which makes sense as this would have coincided with a global temperature rise, plus a plant and insect radiation, which increased the available prey for these animals. But what about older species than those found in the Eocene? The Eocene was the second epoch of the Cenozoic, the era after the end of the age of dinosaurs, with the first being the Paleocene. So is there much evidence for the bats before the Eocene? There are a few studies that have looked at the genetics of modern bats, finding that, based on the timings of when all the lineages diverged from one another, this mammal group probably originated sometime just after the end of the Cretaceous period, in the Paleocene. Pretty amazing when you think about it, that the very oldest bats may have originated right after the age of the dinosaurs. But how come no fossils of these Paleocene bats have been discovered? Well, for a while it was thought that they might have been. Tooth fossils from the late Paleocene of Wyoming were named as the species Wyonycteris chalix in 1987, and considered to represent the world's oldest known bat fossil at the time. Features of the tooth anatomy did look quite similar to certain species of insectivorous bats. However, later research published in 1994 found that the teeth were more similar to a different group of mammals, and so Wyonycteris is today no longer considered to represent a prehistoric bat. The reason for such a relatively poor fossil record of early bats is due to the inherent nature of their anatomy. These mammals have generally very small, lightly built and delicate skeletons that help them to fly so well, but this also means their bones are more likely to be destroyed by natural processes before they can enter the fossil record. As a result, the current accepted evidence for the very oldest bats we know to have existed dates to the early Eocene, between about 56 and 54.5 million years ago. These are all rather fragmentary remains, and the beautiful complete specimens from the slightly younger Green River Formation are very much the exception. These most ancient bats, which have been uncovered from Portugal, China and Australia, are limited to a few teeth and pieces of bone. However, they do show how rapidly these flying mammals spread across the globe. From their likely point of origin on one of the continents in the northern hemisphere, they clearly reached southern continents such as Australasia quite quickly in geological terms. Returning to a bit later in the Eocene again, there's another incredible site that has yielded a variety of early bat species, further illustrating how these mammals had diversified rapidly by the close of the epoch. This is the Messel Pit, a locality in Germany that dates to around 47 million years ago, a bit after the Wyoming Green River Formation bats. Messel is famous in the paleontological world for the diversity of mammal fossils preserved here, in particular early horse relatives, some of which were pregnant at the time of death and even preserve fetuses inside the mother's bodies. Messel is also a site of remarkable diversity in terms of bird, reptile, fish, insect and plant fossils. A snapshot of an entire ecosystem is preserved here, frozen in time for nearly 50 million years. Among all the incredible fossils that have been found here, 4 different genera of bats are known, with a total of 8 different species between them. Unusually, bats are actually relatively common mammal fossils at Messel, with many entirely complete specimens known. Some of these specimens even preserve soft tissue parts of the animals too, with fur, ears, internal organs and gut contents being found. Most of the bat genera from Messel represent lineages that are no longer alive today. However, one of them, a species called Tachypteron franzeni, has been identified by some studies as a member of the Imbalaniurids, which still exist in our modern world. Alternatively, another study has instead found it to be related to the Miniopterids, a different but still living family of bats. And as if it wasn't amazing enough that Messel preserves so many tiny, delicate skeletons of bats with soft tissue parts, paleontologists have even been able to find out what colour some of these prehistoric flyers were, thanks to these fossils. In a study investigating the colour of a variety of extinct organisms, 2 bat genera from Messel, Palaeochiropteryx and Hasioneichterus, were examined, and microscopic structures were identified in the preserved hair of these bats. These structures are preserved melanosomes, kinds of organelles found within the cells of an animal that make and store melanin, a light-absorbing pigment which determines colour. Based on the shapes of these melanosomes, the paleontologists could tell that the 2 bats had originally been shades of brown, since the structure of the melanosomes indicates the kinds of colours that were once present. This is an absolutely incredible discovery, enabling some even more accurate reconstructions of these ancient bats to be made. It's at this point that we must take a look at how modern bats are classified, in order to make better sense of how these animals evolved. The relationship of bats to other mammals has long been a point of contention among researchers, as they were previously positioned as relatives of the perissodactyls, the odd-toed hoofed mammals including rhinos, horses, and tapirs. However, more recent research has found much better genetic support for their position within a mammal grouping called Laurasiatheria, as close relatives to the group including the carnivorans, pangolins, the hoofed mammals as a whole, and the cetaceans. The inner classification of bats, however, is still a source of controversy. The traditional classification splits them into 2 major groups, the non-laryngeal echolocating megabats, called Megachiroptera, and the generally smaller laryngeal echolocating microbats, named Microchiroptera. The megabats include the fruit bats and flying foxes, while the microbats include every other bat group. You'll remember earlier that I made the distinction between different types of echolocating, and while no megabats can use laryngeal echolocation, some lineages have evolved a way to use their tongues and their wings in order to echolocate. As a quick aside, this traditional divide between megabats and microbats was actually taken even further by some researchers in the past, when a scientist in the 1980s argued that the megabats are more closely related to the primates than they are to microbats, proposing that powered flight in mammals independently evolved twice. I made a whole video about this idea and its flaws about 7 years ago if you're interested in hearing more about it, but this hypothesis has since been disproven by the wealth of genetic data and even more anatomical evidence showing that the megabats and microbats do indeed share a common ancestor, and that megabats are not closer to primates. Anyway, going back to that traditional arrangement of all living bats into either Megachiroptera or Microchiroptera, this classification has also since been challenged by recent studies, which organise bats slightly differently. Genetic evidence has shown a close relationship between the microbat superfamily called Rhinolophoidea, which includes the horseshoe bats and relatives, and the megabats, technically named Pteropodidae, with many studies now supporting the grouping of these together as yin Pterochiroptera. The rest of the microbat groups are then united as another grouping called Yangochiroptera. However, this genetically supported classification of the bats introduces another of the issues that keeps bat scientists up at night. If the rhinolophoids are more closely related to the pteropodids, the megabats, than to the Yangochiropterans, then laryngeal echolocation must either have convergently evolved twice in bats, or the pteropodids must have secondarily lost the ability. Evidence from modern bat genetics and studies that looked at how the hearing apparatus develops in the embryos of bats supports the idea that laryngeal echolocation convergently evolved. But other studies that investigated how the cochlea develops in bat fetuses, and evidence from bat fossils that suggest an ancient origin for echolocation, seem to better support the idea that pteropodids secondarily lost the ability. The recent discovery of a bat species that lived about 50 million years ago in the Eocene of France, called Violasia, might be key to deciphering this problem. This prehistoric bat is significant for not being a pancake. Unlike the Green River and Messel Pit bats, which are all flattened, Violasia preserves an uncrushed skull and shows clear evidence that this creature was capable of advanced laryngeal echolocation. It was also found to be a very close relative of the shared ancestor of all living bat species. As such, the fact that Violasia could echolocate is pretty good support for this capability being ancestral to all modern bat lineages, and therefore secondarily lost in the theropodids. Violasia also sheds light on the origin of another iconic feature we associate with bats: roosting in caves. The limestone cave deposit this species was found in preserved a minimum of 23 different individuals, indicating such group sheltering behaviour had evolved in bats by the close of the early Eocene. Interestingly, this timing was also associated with a major period of global cooling, so this was possibly a driving force behind the evolution of large bat congregations in caves. Returning to the issue of convergence within bat lineages, one other recent and rather out there suggestion made by a couple of researchers is that the three groups of bats, the Yangochiropterans, the Theropodids, and the Rhinolophoids, all convergently evolved their flight and echolocating abilities independently of one another, from a common ancestor that was flightless but had webbed fingers. This hypothesis is very speculative, however, and does not take into account the fossil evidence showing that all modern bats can trace back their ancestry to species in the Eocene that could already fly. The most detailed analysis of early bat evolution undertaken so far was a recent 2024 study that looked at more than 60 different species of bats known from the Eocene epoch, and investigated how they are related to modern lineages. Many of these prehistoric bats had not been properly analysed in the larger context of bat evolution before, since they are only known from very partial remains, in many cases only being represented by teeth. The results of this study were somewhat surprising to bat researchers, but they might just provide us with the best current understanding of how these marvellous animals evolved. According to this study, around 6 different superfamily level lineages of stem bats from the Eocene and following Oligocene epochs were recognised, and several fossil species that had been thought to represent ancient examples of crown group bats were discovered to actually be stem bats. Now, I should explain the concept of stem and crown groups here. The crown group of any given lineage of organisms includes the most recent common ancestor of all the living species, plus all its descendants, including extinct ones. So, tracing back the history of all currently alive bats to the single point where they started to diverge from one another, all these lineages are the crown bats. The stem bats are then those lineages that split off before that ancestor diverged, but which can still be classified as bats. This 2024 study therefore clarified the relations of Eocene bats to one another, moving numerous species once thought to be crown bats into the stem lineages, and showing that the stem bats were even more diversified than we'd realised. Not only that, but it shows that multiple bat lineages actually branched off before the best known of the Eocene bats diverged, the ones represented by complete fossil remains, such as Onychonycteris and Icharonicteris. These earlier branching bats are highly fragmentary, and so we don't know what their bodies looked like. But it does indicate that there are some more primitive Eocene bats out there that split off before the famous flight-capable North American species. Therefore, it helps to demystify a bit of the puzzle surrounding bat evolution. From our biased modern perspective, it looks like bats suddenly turn up fully flight ready in the fossil record, but the fact that several lineages diverged before this shows that clearly there was more going on with these animals before Icharonicteris and Onychonycteris appeared. We just haven't found their complete body fossils yet. But if we did, they would presumably show more transitional features between the hypothetical gliding ancestor and powered flyers. This study also analysed fossils of crown group bats to determine when they appeared. Rather astonishingly, this study found the oldest example of a crown group bat to be the species Microchiropteryx foliae, which lived about 54 million years ago in India. It was classified within the Yangochiropteran superfamily Vespertilionoidea, suggesting that the first crown bats appeared very soon after these mammals first took to the skies, at least in geological terms, as this was only about 2 million years after the earliest bat fossils overall. The study supports the classification of the crown bats into Yin-Pterochiroptera and Yangochiroptera, although the pteropodids, the megabats, were not analysed in the study. Within Yin-Pterochiroptera, the rhinolophoids were found to be represented by only one fossil species, but its occurrence indicates that this lineage had split into most of its modern family groupings by about 33.7 million years ago. Among Yangochiropterans, Vespertilionoidea, the most diverse living superfamily, was found to have radiated into most modern lineages by about 47 million years ago, after originating more than 54 million years ago as indicated by the inclusion of the ancient Microchiropteryx. No definite fossils could be classified as belonging to the Noctilionoid superfamily of Yangochiropterans. However, the third Yangochiropteran superfamily, the Emballoneuroids, is represented by quite a few prehistoric species, and based on the ages of these fossils, the Noctilionoids and Emballoneuroids must have split from one another no later than 43 million years ago. So the crown bats are all very deeply diverged from one another. So, to summarise, bats turn up in the fossil record some 56 million years ago and diversified rapidly, spreading across the globe. Sometime between then and about 34 million years ago, all the modern bat families had evolved, and today Chiroptera is the second most diverse order of mammals. For the moment, we don't have direct fossil evidence of the flightless bat ancestor, but we can speculate using the data we do have to inform us about what it was probably like. Presumably, it would have been a small arboreal mammal that clambered about in the trees, chasing after insects. It was likely a nocturnal creature, and as a population of these animals became increasingly specialised for leaping between branches, a lineage descending from this population would, over many generations and under the influence of natural selection, have favoured the accumulation of mutations that resulted in stretched skin membranes spanning the arms, fingers, and legs. Initially, these membranes would have allowed these pre-bats to glide, presumably in pursuit of their prey, and eventually, a lineage of these gliders would have developed the ability to power their flight through flapping motions. Though early species such as Onychonycteris, with their clawed fingers, would still have returned to the trees to land and climb about. There's clearly still much to be learned about the evolution of bats, but there's no doubt that this fascinating order of mammals has undergone an astonishing evolutionary journey. The debates and discussions surrounding the origins and relationships of these animals have spurred so many intriguing investigations into how they evolved, through examining their fossils, genetics, and embryological development. I hope this video has served as a useful summary of where we currently stand with regard to bat evolution. I'm sure that future discoveries will no doubt make some of the things I've talked about in this video outdated, but that's a good sign that our scientific understanding is making progress. Please do let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this video and tell me what other groups of animals you'd like to see me cover the evolution of. Also, if people would like some more bat content, I've been seriously considering doing a video on the future evolution of bats, now that we've looked at their past evolution. The speculative evolution of bats in the far future is something that's actually come up quite a lot in various media, such as the future predators of Primeval, the Night Stalker of After Man, and Velociteris of L'Animaux du Futur, among others. So if that sounds like a video you'd enjoy seeing, do let me know in the comments. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to my other channel, 7 Days of Science. Over on this channel, my co-presenters and I make weekly videos covering all the most fascinating science news of the past week. So if you'd like a good way to keep up to date with the latest discoveries, you might like what we do over there. We also have a Patreon page where you can support us in return for some fun bonus content. Please do like this video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it, and be sure to press that bell icon so you don't miss our next upload, and so you can learn more about our world, its history, and the wonderful life that surrounds us all.